I'm really excited to be here with you since I supported the IAC from its founding, and I had the honor to participate and to speak in the first summit of the IAC that, if I remember, took place in Washington, D.C., and to see the organization today, how it became so influential, so important. I worked with IAC as a minister, but today as an ambassador, I can see with my own eyes the activities. And whenever we need, to demonstrate support for Israel, the IAC activists are the first one to show up. And I also want to thank Dr. Miri Edelson, and together with her late husband, dear Sheldon, without their generosity and without their vision, the IAC would never achieve what it achieved. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and you all deserve a round of applause.
So now let's talk about current affairs, and obviously we'll start with Iran. Defense Minister Benny Gantz will be here tomorrow. He's now in Washington, D.C. He met both Defense Secretary Austin and Secretary Blinken. Is there a way for Israel to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions, and is there a way to do it alongside with the Biden administration?
So, since this is maybe the most important issue on the table, a little bit of background is needed. So may I remind that Israel opposed the JCPOA, I mean the old Iran deal. We opposed it because we thought it was fundamentally flawed, and we thought it's only, kicking the can down the road, limiting Iran for several years. And I'm encouraged that today, even the Biden administration, many of them were the same people who designed this agreement, they agree with us. They basically say we need a longer, stronger, and broader deal. The meaning is that the old deal that was signed during the Obama term is not sufficient to block Iran's pathway towards becoming a nuclear power. And that is why they're saying it. So coming back to your question, whether Iran can be stopped, the answer is clearly yes. If Israel can attack more than 1,000 times Iranian forces in Syria in order to prevent Iran from entrenching itself in Syria, so definitely the whole international community, together with the United States, can provide a formula, a solution to stop Iran. If you ask me what is this formula, the answer is quite clear. We should listen to the wise words of President Roosevelt, who used to say, speak softly, but also carry a big stick. The international community for many years spoke very softly to Iran. Sanctions are very important, but sanctions are not enough. Iran is on the verge of becoming a nuclear power, and this is the time now to present the Iranian regime a credible military threat that would force them to decide between their own survival as a regime and their nuclear ambitions, and I believe the answer would be clear. Iran would rush to the negotiating table once they would be presented with a clear, credible military threat. But, again, we cannot rely on the international community. Israel is in a unique situation. For us, it's an existential threat, and we are not going to wait until Iran would become a nuclear threshold country. We are leaving all options on the table, and we're not going to hesitate. We will do whatever is needed.
So, today, talks were resumed in Vienna. If talks fail, is there other ways to stop Iran? Maybe in the UN, maybe through the Security Council, you're stationed there. Can it be more effective?
It can, and we're in a dilemma because Israel hopes that the negotiations in Vienna would fail. We don't want them to succeed because, as I explained, returning to the JCPOA would be a grave mistake, because it's a flawed deal. And by returning to this deal, the international community would also give up all the leverage, and it would diminish any chances to achieve a better diplomatic solution in the future, because once Iran would be allowed to be back on the track of the JCPOA, why would they agree to negotiate in the future a deal that is worse for them? It would never happen. So we hope that the negotiation fails. And once they would be fail, as you described, for me, as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, my expectations would be that the signatories of the old deal, the JCPOA, would immediately activate, initiate the snapback mechanism that was an important part of the JCPOA. And once the snapback mechanism would be initiated, then what we're talking about, the crippling sanctions, that would happen immediately, because then the Security Council would have to reimpose the sanctions over Iran. All member states would have to comply, in compared to the situation today when we are dealing only with American sanctions that the Chinese are trying to bypass. But again, I'm reiterating what I said before. Sanctions are not enough. It's quite clear that with the butcher of Tehran, President Raisi, he must be faced with a credible military threat that would force him to decide between his own survival and his nuclear ambitions.
So let's use our time not only for Iran, but for other issues. One issue that you were dealing with constantly is fighting the BDS. And one main issue on the agenda is the Ben and Jerry's case and their effort to boycott the West Bank and maybe Israel. How do you stop them, and how do you stop other companies trying to do the same?
You know, we're here in the United States, so first of all, it's important to think about this absurd. In a year where 3 Muslim countries decided to repeal their decisions, their legislations to boycott Israel, an American company, Ben & Jerry, decided to boycott the Jewish state. This is a disgrace, really. So, you know, as a minister, as you described, I led the fight against the BDS anti-Semitic movement. I also cooperated with the IAC. Obviously, I think that we had great successes, and we can say today that the BDS is a failure. Israel, thank God, is thriving, our economy is booming, our foreign relations are growing, but we cannot be complacent. Of course, this is an ongoing struggle, it's a long-term struggle. We're fighting to let the young generation all around the world know the true nature of Israel. So as Israel's ambassador in the UN, my role is to try and build a resilience for Israel from boycotts and delegitimization. So what I do mainly is to showcase Israel's contribution to the world. Only a week ago, I lit the menorah candles in Hanukkah together with my Moroccan counterpart. I invited 9 innovators from Israel to present a dozen of ambassadors our amazing solutions to the, as I said, the world's most pressing problems like water scarcity, like food insecurity, and many more solutions. 2 weeks ago, I held an exciting event with 25 African ambassadors, presenting them together with an Israeli NGO, Innovation Africa, how Israel is connecting more than 2,000 African villages to running water and renewable energies. By the way, many of the ambassadors had tears in their eyes when they saw what Israel is doing for their own citizens. So I think that today the atmosphere toward Israel is much better at the UN, maybe because also the Abraham Accords. But one last thing that I want to emphasize, it's not enough to showcase Israel's contribution. We should always be on the offense as well. We should expose the hypocrisy of the BDS activists. Many of them are connected to terror organizations. Many of them hold anti-Semitic views. So with the cooperation and the support of the ISC activists, we are continuing to delegitimize our delegitimizers.
Yes, and I would add on that one thing. It's not an Israeli mission, but it's a mission.
Is it polite to drink from the bottle here? It's
a necessity. It's a mission of
you haven't supplied me
of all the good forces in the world. Otherwise, we will be doomed. You served in the last year as an ambassador, Israeli ambassador in Washington as well, and one big deal coming out of your term there is the fact that the Israelis, within a year, won't need a visa anymore to come to the U.S.
Oh. So, from one absurd to another, let me start with a personal story that I never told before. I'm now Israel's ambassador. I'm more than 14 months here in the United States. This is a true story. My parents were not able, couldn't get a visa to visit their own family and their grandchildren here in the United States since I was appointed. But this is not the reason why I started to deal with this issue. You know that today Israelis can enter the United Arab Emirates without a visa, but they cannot enter our closest ally, the United States of America, without a visa, while 40 other countries from all around the world are already included in the visa waiver program. So that is why when I got so many requests from Israeli families, I understood that I must prioritize this issue, including Israel, in the visa waiver program. I learned this issue. I tried to analyze the obstacles that we had before. I learned them thoroughly, and I had a very critical observation. I realized that the the official clerks who were dealing with the visa applications, they didn't really understood the Israeli culture. They used, I need one more minute, sorry. They used to refuse to young Israelis who were asking for a visa because they thought, well, they are 22 years old, they still don't have a decent job, or they're still students, so they suspected them of becoming illegal immigrants. So our refusal rate went higher than 3%. That's what prevented Israel from joining this visa waiver program. So once I explained it to Secretary Mayorkas, and I even had the honor and opportunity to speak with the president himself, and they prioritized this process, so now I can give you my assessment that until the end of 2022, many of the relatives and the families of the ISC activists could be invited without a visa to participate in the next conference here.
So we're running out of time, and I promised everyone to be precise and to be on time, but I must ask you another question, one last question. It is no secret that you're a politician. You came from here as a politician. You were a minister.
You were skipping the historic
and
Abraham
obviously,
Accords.
time is time. You know, I work on TV, and I'm working for the timetable. But probably once you finish your UN mission, you will go back to politics. Do you foresee yourself as a future Israeli prime minister? That's something you wish to do?
Well, why am I not surprised from the question? I think it's no coincidence that we're sitting here at the Diplomat Hotel. So I must behave as a diplomat. And I can tell you only that I'm focused 100% on my role at the UN, defending Israel on the world stage. I will continue to do that, and if there is something to announce in the future, I would give you a call. Thank you very much.